Well, you have finally got here. You are listening to the Erskin Music Podcast. Here, by popular demand, we discuss life, culture, Christ, and of course, music. These half-hour broadcasts are perfect for a commute, coffee time, chat, or any other gap in your schedule where you want to put great content. So without further ado, let's join the conversation today, already in progress.
I think you knew what you were getting yourself in for today. It was going to be crazy nonetheless. The Dolphins are here. And so you know when I have a Dolphins episode, I've been prepping and getting ready because, well, the Dolphins come out often. Hey, but I want to just go ahead and say that we've got Yancy coming on here in just a few moments, and we're going to have a great interview. I'm looking forward to this interview. Yancy always knocks it out of the park, and she will do so again today. But I wanted to just go ahead and say this. Why with the VT on here? Can I say VeggieTales? I just did. Why VT? Well, some of you guys know, if you've been watching the Erskin Music Show, we have a new foster placement with us. They've been with us for almost a month now, and a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old. And there are moments in time, points in a person's life in which you move past certain things. We've probably had, upward 15, 20 or so different foster kids, sets of kids. I feel like I've raised about 10 to 12 different kids for a significant period of their lives. And so our kids are teenagers now. They're into that whole world. We watch Special Forces and adultish type things. So when we got these foster kids, they really love some VeggieTales. They really love some VeggieTales. And so I've been jettisoned back into this world. And every time that you go around this whole cycle, this whole globe of raising kids, you recognize that there's things that you missed the first time. And here's a question. And honestly, I want to ask the audience this. Seriously, draw nigh, because I want to ask you this question. Audience, when on VeggieTales they say it's time for silly songs, and then they proceed to sing silly songs, and there's one that's on loop in my mind. The manatee, you are the one for me. That is on loop in my mind. I cannot get it out of my head. That's a problem. I'm trying to do Erskin music, and that's not Erskin music. Nonetheless, I asked myself the question the other day. When they say it's time for silly songs, I'm a little bit confused because I thought the whole thing was silly songs. That's what you get with VT, and that's what's coming into my life. It's the Erskin Music Show. I hope you guys are getting excited for Yancy. I got a quick devotion today. I'm not going to run roughshod over the devotion, but we do want to make sure that we have some time with the Lord, have some time in prayer, lift up this show to the Lord, and just ask the Lord to do what only He can do through a show like this that we've started with VeggieTales. Not to cut you off, but I'm cutting you off because it's kind of my show. But hopefully this will be a good cutting you off. Just to make an observation about this, it's interesting when you're looking at the timing of God related to some of these sensitive matters. You've been in the industry for 25, 27 years, and you've been doing a lot of different projects, and people know your heart, and they know your vision. They know your commitment to children and watching people grow up in the faith and be solidified in their faith at a young age and then continue on in a healthy manner. This is, when I say Yancy 2.0, I look at this as a very sensitive subject matter because there's, like you were talking about, there's the ditch on both sides there where it just becomes, our lives, the way that we were raised in the faith was just terrible and our parents did a terrible job. No, they did the best they possibly could. And I think when I had Josh Snyder on, he was talking about the first time he got grounded for playing Toby Mac. His parents just didn't understand that music and what it was supposed to represent. And then his parents have grown over the years, and he doesn't look down on his parents because they did that, but they were doing the best they could at the time. So there's that side of it in which the parents were too strict, or the kids were just too wild, and there's culture of expectation. You really have to be, and this is my compliment to you, Yancy, you really have to be a mature believer to be able to process, on one hand, the hurt that's there, sometimes the misconceptions that are there, and to balance that in a way. As I was listening to it last night, I was thinking, this is kind of the middle of the road here. She's not, like you're talking about, it's not an expose where everything was terrible, but it's not, rose-colored glasses where everything was good. This is her walking down the road and saying, let's hear the stories and let's process and let's heal and let's continue to move forward in faith. And so I just wanted to commend you and just say thank you so much for your maturity and dealing with the sensitive subject matter.
Well, thank you very much. I think, I think when all is said and done, this will be one of my life's greatest honors is having these conversations. I think it's really twofold. I think on one hand, I want a bunch of PKs and ministry kids out there to just be able to see themselves in some other people's stories and realize like they're not alone. It's not just them. I think many times they can see themselves in someone else's story. And then at the same time, often I think they'll realize, okay, something they experienced, there's other people out there that have experienced something 10 times worse. And so like they actually could like have a little bit about their own story.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side of that, I really want pastors, executive pastors, any ministry leaders that are out there running departments in a church. I want them listening to this because I feel like there's so much that can be learned so they can make some, minor changes in how they lead their staff or expectations they have for their team, or just even little things about how often discipleship maybe gets overlooked in some of those pastors' kids because they just kind of think like, oh, okay, well, your family's on payroll, or your dad is this person, you're fine, you're not struggling with this. And I'm one of the things I'm hearing is like, many times they're kind of skipped over rather than leaning into that and really investing in those kids as well as anybody else in the youth group,
This is interesting, Yancy, because I'm glad that you said that. I was having a conversation with a student from Belmont the other day. We went out, grabbed coffee, and just checking in with the young students, and very promising music careers in front of them. And they were talking about the size of church and the type of church they want to go to, place where they could use their skills. And I started referring to that, and they made a comment about discipleship. And I said, correct me if I'm wrong, this may have changed because I'm not necessarily in your same age demographic or in the school mentality, but people who are at certain size church, when they're in production, they're pretty much not a part of the church, as I understand. You don't go to the same discipleship meetings, you're not in the same Bible studies. In fact, when this student was helping me out to do something, they were running the production and they were adjusting various things before my performance, but they were not a part of the Bible study and the different things that we were doing backstage, prayer and all those different things. And I was like, there's a subculture that exists within a subculture, and it can be preachers' kids, it can be musicians, oftentimes are overlooked. Artists sometimes are overlooked because you come into the church and then your expectations are different than everybody else who comes in the church. And so I think that that's good of you, Yancy, to have an eye out to say, wait a minute, there's some gaps in this thing. There's some people who are getting overlooked. And if we're going to talk about discipleship, we want to make sure that that is in a healthy manner, flourishing among all of God's people.
Yeah. It's just like anything. Oftentimes with the best of intentions, you still end up with some blinders on your eyes. And so I think these conversations are just really, bringing to light some issues that maybe you just haven't paused to process before and think through. And as soon as you hear somebody say it out loud, you can put it through your own context and your own situation and kind of realize like, oh yeah, these are little things I can do. This is me just intentionally having an extra conversation with that staff kid or whatnot. And so, one of the things, I just kind of have felt as the podcast even began a few months back, is just that in many ways, God is saying enough is enough, and like just the dead bodies on the side of the road, or, just the baggage of the things that we have heard about through the rumor mill over the years. I really think, it's an issue that matters to the heart of God, because
he
would be saying it's not okay that kingdom work has this many casualties. And so I really hope that it will be something that brings a lot of healing to move the church forward in healthier ways.
Well, that certainly gives a sense of why people enjoy this show. Very engaging, very heartfelt. We will return to the conversation in a few moments, but first, let's thank our sponsors, Life Action Ministries, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and you for all your awesome support. And Holt International. Thanks so much to our partners who make such a difference.
Thanks, Jason. Hi, I'm Dawn.
And I'm Steve of Don and Steve Plus. We're a podcast, and if you've not checked it out, hope you'll do that. You can visit our website. It is donandsteveplus.com, or you can find us wherever you get your podcasts.
We do hope that you'll be able to join us, even as you continue to follow Erskin Music. Erskin does such a great job of bringing out topics. They're not all easy.
Right. I love that he'll tackle just about any topic.
Yeah. He will tackle any topic and invite you to the conversation, which is always a plus because learning the art of conversation, well, it's much needed.
It certainly is. And he does a great job with those conversations. So, Erskin, thanks for doing that. Thanks for tackling those tough topics. And thanks for listening to the Erskin Music Show.
All right, let's get back to the show. This is where it gets good.
I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday, and they were saying that, I don't know if it was a seminary, but people that they had grown up with in church that had professed at one time faith in Christ, and they'd gone on mission trips together. They'd done a lot of ministry things together. They can look back over the course of their lives, and I think it was like almost like 10 or 20 people that they grew up with. They were like, that person does not go to church anymore. That person doesn't want to have anything to do with the faith anymore. That person is not engaged whatsoever. And it's just like, okay, I mean, there's obviously God is sovereign. The gospel is the gospel, but what is happening in the sense of like people just jettisoning it and saying, wait a minute, this is not what I expected, or I'm not, I'm not doing this anymore. And like you said, the ministry bodies that are strewn over the centuries and the decades, every once in a while you hear, wonderful story of somebody that flourishes, and they begin to process things a little bit later on when you thought, man, that I'm not sure that they're understanding anything that's going on there, and then they go on, they become a pastor, and they they're on the mission field. But you hear a lot of stories of people who just they just walked away, or maybe not even walked away. They're sometimes on the internet saying the most vile things about God's people and the church, and that definitely I know hurts the heart of God.
Yeah. One of the things, I learned walking through one of those hard seasons of a situation that had happened for me and for my family. I remember, just coming and to the realization that God is always good, even when his people aren't. Never confuse the two. And,
That's
even
good.
as I had some friends of mine that I'd grown up with, we'd gone to the same church, we'd heard a lot of the same sermons, and some other junk had happened in their life. And they were both people that had kind of chosen to walk away. And in that season, I remember both of them, like after having an evening where we had dinner and hung out, both of them messaging me and commenting afterwards, like, I'm so impressed that you've been able to not let this affect your faith, and not shake your faith. And I was like, that's my only option. Like, this was a messed up situation that was so broken. I knew I couldn't fix it on my own, So like,
Wow.
and the way my brain worked, I'm like, why in the world would I run out there and try to go to the world where it would just be me left trying to build the pieces back from the
Ooh,
rubble?
that's good.
Instead,
You, Lord, have the bread of life.
trusting God was my only option because I knew he could fix it, And so like, let me just let him fix it. That doesn't mean it doesn't hurt any less, as you're walking through it. But I think that's where a lot of people get messed up is, they confuse what some humans that, yes, are made in the image of God have done to them. Those words, those actions, they confuse that with the character of God. And you have to separate it. You have to realize these are human beings that have human nature that are still struggling to bear the fruit of the Spirit. And sometimes they strike out, and that's not what they bear. But you can't blame their behavior on God. You've got to separate it and trust him for his good character and never confuse the two.
Yeah, I want to just say that, as someone who aspires maybe a greater capacity in pastoral ministry. We're doing church planning. We've been church planning here in East Nashville for the last 4 years. A very sensitive subject matter. But when people don't realize this, that people's lives are complex. There's a lot of things that go on in people's lives. And you just take something that's as simple as in marriage, people who are having difficulty. Like, that's a tinderbox of counseling and helping people navigate through some of those things. And so, say for instance, somebody gets a divorce. How does the church respond to that? How do you counsel through that? I mean, it is just devastating. What if there's infidelity and types of things like that in which it is required upon you to bring church discipline in people's lives? Like, those are some of the thorniest issues, and it's not theoretical issues. That is going to happen. There are going to be marital struggles and challenges because Satan hates those kind of things. But speaking into those things, I've seen good churches, good pastors who have counseled biblically. They've told people exactly what God's word says, but because of the intensity and just the bomb that has taken place in their lives, they feel hurt by the church. They revile against the church. And it's like, yeah, I know that there's some things that the church doesn't get right in some areas that they don't necessarily always handle the correct way, but sometimes they do. But life is just messy like that. And sometimes people don't respond the way that, okay, we've been rebuked and the word of God says this and it clearly says this. And so therefore we're going to conform our lives to the word of God. It just doesn't work that way. And so on both sides of the street, there's church hurt that is things that could have been avoided, should have been avoided to some extent. And then there's things that this is just what the church does. Like, church discipline is a thing, like recognizing a certain amount of accountability in your family, and being, brought to bear on those things. That's a thing. Like, that has to happen. So yeah, it's just a lot. If I could ask this, and you can take this wherever you want to, Yancy, has there been in your life a time, a season, a circumstance that you think of that maybe people who are listening to this today could say, man, I'm glad that she shined the light on that through the lens of her life, because, I've been thinking that same thing.
Like, what do you mean? Like,
I wanted to make that general, but I mean, is there a specific?
I know, it's so general. Be more specific.
What comes to mind, I guess, when you think about an area that most people don't think about? There's an area in ministry that can get overlooked, and you think about in my own life, this is what happened to me. This is my story, and I would just share this today because there's somebody who might be in the same boat. You might need to hear these words. I'll let you take that and run with it. So I left it broad, but then you can specify where you want to go.
I think a couple things come to mind. I think, one of the things that I've processed is, just about every guest has made the comment about the glass house or the fish bowl or the microscope, like, it's all the same thing, no matter how they word it.
Sure.
And so that is a thing. And I believe it's important to remember that these are people that have spouses, have children. And many times you can have an opinion of someone and you can start verbalizing that opinion and throwing some things around out there in your church community. And it's important to remember that these are people that have a family. And do you want such things to be said about you to your children or overheard? Do you want such things to be said about your spouse? I think it's kind of like, sometimes I think church people like just don't even have a filter. They think they can be as critical as they want to be of that pastor or that person in leadership, and not saying you can't ever question anything. I just think we almost lose some manners and some dignity. You know, I've thought about it like this, like, I think there's probably very few jobs out there where you have the job and your family is brought into the public mix of it. You know, like, sure, we know politicians would fall into that category. I think probably in local communities, the closest thing would maybe be like some school principals or some, you know, school superintendents or something like that, where a lot of people in the neighborhood could have an opinion about that person and their job and that kind of over, you know. But I've thought about it on the flip side. I'm like, my insurance agent, you know, that has our car insurance, like, I've been to his office. I'm sure I've seen a picture of his family, you know, when I was there, but I don't really know anything about his family. Like, and nor is anything that's going on in his personal life affecting my opinion of our business relationship, of him helping me insure my cars, you know? And I think that's just one of those things that normal people don't really process the differences in that relationship. And so,
yeah, it's not nearly as transactional,
caught up in the middle of it.
Yeah, as it is relational in that regard. And having community. I was talking with and I think it may have been one of my ministry partners. I think it was. I'm not going to say their name because we talk a lot about various things that go on.
Yeah.
And he was talking about sort of on the other side of this, doing triage for missionaries, because there's a lot of missionaries that in a lot of ways will just get overlooked, or a missionary spouse will pass away. I had this situation happen directly in my own family. A missionary spouse will pass away, and then it's kind of like, well, you're not doing missions anymore. Well, you've relocated, your family is in a particular place. Like, figure out the onboarding and off-ramp process of that. But it's like, okay, you don't raise support anymore. Okay, your support is dropped. And like stories like that, where it's just like, people feel like it's their responsibility to keep the pastor, keep people in ministry humble.
Yeah.
And so you sometimes will look at the salary and you're like, okay, should they now go get an extra job or 2 or 3 so that they can do the things that you've called them to do in terms of ministry? And I've heard some just terrible, terrible stories of pastors' wives not having just even basic things because their budget is just so lean, and there's just so many things that they have to do without because, you know, they have to serve the church after all. And so there's just a lot that's out there. We could take this conversation offline, and I'm sure have a lot of maybe similar things, because as a parent, I'm always mindful of the fact that even though it's not necessarily pastoral ministry, it's more of an itinerant ministry. Like, all of that comes with a cost. Like, there are certain things that I have missed that I've wanted to be around for. And I will say, there are very many times when I can think of churches, did a revival in Dakar, Senegal, rallying around my wife or my family, whoever's around, and then praying for us and really investing in the entire family. I will say there have been numerous examples of that as well. And I'm always very much appreciative of the fact that when I go into a conference somewhere, sometimes people will buy flowers for my wife who may not be at the conference, just to say that we know that without her sacrifice and the things that she's doing, you would not be able to do what it is that you're doing. And so I'm mindful of those things, and those things do matter.
Well, you probably already know that when you hear that sound, there's music on the way. After all, this is kind of a music show. Sit back and enjoy. All the music can be easily found on your favorite digital distribution channels. Turn up the volume, and here we go.
We were made in the image of God. Every man, woman, boy, and girl. We were made in the image of God. God so loved that it changed the world. We can change the world. In the beginning, when God made people, He made a boy, He made a girl, gave us dominion over creation, told us to go into all the world. We were made in
And so, man, I'm so excited about this resource and being able to hear more episodes of this. You
Yes,
you
please do.
expanded it because I guess somebody said, it's not just the preacher's kids, but it's also the missionaries that are out there and other people who are experiencing these types of things in ministry. So I'm glad to hear that you expanded it, um, and are
Yeah,
taking
I
it
think,
into
in
consideration.
general, it's to me, it's ministry kids. I mean, there's people that might be like, for instance, my dad has never been a senior pastor, but I've always considered myself a PK. So you've got those people that would be
Sure.
like, oh, a PK is only a senior pastor. But I'm sorry, when you work in mega churches that have a high level of leadership, there's a bunch of people that wear those high level hats, and my dad
Yes.
has had those and whatnot. And so, I mean, it's it still is the same thing. So, whether it was a worship pastor role or a children's pastor or student ministry, like if you're running an area of ministry in a church, you totally fall under this PK umbrella. But yeah, PK's ministry kids. I did have multiple people request missionary kids, and so
Oh, yes.
this week's episode is my first missionary kid story. And so certainly those things count because it's all interchangeable. And I had one friend, actually, just because she had always been like a departmental ministry director type role, she was like, she didn't think of herself as having PKs, but her children identified as a PK. And
Sure.
when she actually went through a job change at one point, she said her kids were really struggling because their identity felt rocked because of her job change. And she was like, I didn't even know they thought of themselves, in
Mhm.
that way until, just the title had been changed. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
But
And
there's
so,
there's amazing things to learn. I've even had some people listening. They're like, normal people in a church should just listen to this, just because if you really want to learn and care, I think all of us can adjust our behavior to operate in a more fruit of the spirit bearing way, So no
mhm.
matter I kind of say, no matter what side of the table you're sitting on at the conversation, like there's something you can walk away and learn.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So exciting. What an awesome interview. And we have more projects hopefully that we'll be able to do in the future, but this is an
Yeah.
important project I think that you are working on, and I wanted to highlight that. Check out Yancy's Ministries. She's got a ton of different things, books out there, resources that are out there. As we said before, she's working on a new children's song that's going to be out hopefully in April,
Yeah.
prayerfully in April. Two-time Dove Award winning. What's up? Just really quickly before you jump off of here, I know that braggadocious it would not be the case. As much hard work as you put in there, I'm glad that people are starting to finally recognize just the incredible work that you put in over the years and acknowledge that.
Mhm.
Talk to me about winning a second Dove Award
Oh my gosh. I mean,
en route to a third.
whew, I, I don't even know what to say other than it's just God's kindness. I think, I think one of the things that makes me happy about this second win is, I do make two different kinds of music. And so uh, I make some music for younger kids called Little Praise Party. And
Hmm.
those are the cartoon version of me. And when I won my first Dove, it was for one of those projects, which is a whole special project in and of itself. But this more recent Dove that I won in October, it was for the bigger kid music I make that I'm gearing towards preteens. It sounds really normal. I would say it sounds about 95% not like kids' music,
Uh-huh.
easily. But I'm kind of targeting that towards some older kids. And so that's one this time. And so what makes me, I think, happiest about it is just now both kinds of music that I make for kids have won a Dove. And so it feels very well rounded and balanced. And so I'm grateful.
Well, I'm gonna praise the Lord for that, and I have seen the elevation of Yancey over the years, 1.0, 2.0, and I'm super excited about that. I'm going to pull a little Robert Redford on you here. This is The Natural, the scene where, you know, they're about to make the pitch, and then he points out, kind of pulls a little Babe Ruth on him there, and he's just about to knock it out of the park. He's showing you where he's gonna hit the shot. And so I'm gonna go ahead and call this shot real quick. I'm pointing out there. My podcast is ranked number 42 of Nashville's top 100. I don't know if your podcast is ranked yet, but I'm just calling the shot, people. Yancy's podcast will be ranked number 1 here before too much longer. It's the exquisite Stained Glass Kids Erskin Music Podcast will be number 2.
Oh my gosh.
Calling my shot.
I mean, I'll take it. I'm not gonna fight you on that. I will say, everyone, you can go to stainedglasskids.com to go learn more about the podcast. Go straight to it. Obviously, it's on any of the podcasting platforms. Stained Glass Kids with Yancy. Find that. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook as well. And every week, I share some quotes on the social media from that week's episode, just some things that stuck out to us. So follow along with that, repost, share, text it to people, all the things, and we'll make this thing grow.
Amen.
So Erskin's prediction can come true.
Calling the shot, folks. What do we got to do here? Oh, that was my back crack, but you know, sound effects are not on.
Hey, that's all right.
Nobody could hear it. Anyway, consummate professional, incredible friend. Thank you so much, Yancy. You were always wonderful.
Thank you for having me, Erskin.
We have come to the end of this episode. Don't miss a final word from Erskin.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being a part of the Erskin Music Podcast experience. To all of our guests that come on the show, and for all of our sponsors, thank you guys so much for being a part of it. And for you who listen to the show, you and I, we make this thing happen by simply being kind to one another in the comment section, and then going as followers of Christ and living this thing out. If anybody needs more information, erskinmusic.com is where you start, and then all the nonsense starts, all the social media that's out there. But let's go live it out. See you guys very soon.